January 27th, 2026. So as normal, we'll start the meeting with requests for bill introductions. Any requests for bill introductions from the committee? I do have one. This one is RS 263175. And I'll ask the speaker to see if we can get this bill back to the committee, but this has to do with the definitions of candy and I think mainly just candy. There's been some questions on that definition in the past, caused some confusion. So there are some states that have definitions which are a little bit easier to understand. But, bill kind of aligns with one of those other states. So any questions on that? Concerns? Seeing none, the request is accepted. Any other bill introduction requests? Any from the audience? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and get into the agenda for the day. Today we have an informational hearing from Mr. Steve Anderson, the Inspector General in the Attorney General's office. He's going to give us a quick overview. Welcome to committee, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Chair and Albert Camp, members of the committee. I am Steve Anderson, and I'm always pleased to be in front of a committee like this and talk about the Inspector General's office. As an overview, I want to talk about the number of complaints of fraud, waste, and abuse and illegal acts concerning the Medicaid program, CHIP, and Medicaid that the office continues to see. I can tell you that number continues to go up from year to year. We've also started seeing an increase in complaints involving cash and food assistance. As some of you may recall, we had our authority expanded last year under House Bill 2217. That expanded us so we can look at the cash and food programs in addition to Medicaid. So we're doing that. Unfortunately, we didn't get our funding for our 9 FTEs for that, but we hope to see that get resolved. Let me talk a little bit about our audits. There's a chart in the handout that lists every audit that we've completed since 2021. And you'll see that that breaks down the various issues, and then we have fraud, or I'm sorry, waste, overpayments, and savings, and as well as the number of findings and recommendations. And I'll use the Transmed one there at the bottom of the first page for, it says $16 million in waste. That basically means there were payments that were made by the state to the MCOs, or the managed care organizations, in capitation payments, which are the monthly payments that the state makes to the managed care organizations. That shouldn't have been made. However, there was no way to recover those funds because the person was inappropriately on the program. So consequently, that money was paid out, and we got nothing to show for it, and there's no way to recover that funds. So we declared it as waste. Overpayments, and we have some examples of overpayments where we paid out too much money for processes that shouldn't have been paid. And again, there's no way to recover those funds. My office does not have the ability to recover those funds. That's a discussion we've had with various groups. We lack the authority to pull money back or basically claw it back. And we identify it to the agency, and the agency has that decision whether or not they want to attempt to claw it back. However, there's rules in place that prevent them from doing very much of that. And then lastly is savings, and that is in the case of the Transmed program, that $1.5 million was where we identified is immediately remove those people from the program, and that money was saved. So by taking action on our what we told them to do, they were able to save that money. On page 2, I'll use another example. On the CCRC one, we identified there was $12 million in savings. That was a result of a legislative change and how they were viewing continuing care recovery centers. And because of that change, the state of Kansas saved $12 million per year in state general funds. The last thing that we had put out is on the, it's an interim audit, and I'll talk about that audit more down here, but we identified that $36 million could be saved immediately if the state would remove people that have not had functional assessments and put them on regular Medicaid. The difference between somebody being on a waiver, which is over $5,000 per month, capitation cost, versus being on standard Medicaid, which is around $800 a month. We could save $36 million a year by making that one simple change if they would do it for people that have not had their required functional assessment. So ongoing audits that we have, yes, sir.
And feel free, if anybody has any questions at any time, we'll go ahead. Can you just walk through that again? So
Sure.
you made a statement, if we did a small, what I would think is a simple assessment, the state can save $36 million, which that's a lot of money. Can you go back and
Sure.
walk through what exactly that means?
You bet, I can. It's talked about later in the testimony too, but I'll go ahead and cover it right now. Here's what we have going on is people who are on the waivers, those are like the physical disabled waiver. This is a good example of that. You have to have a functional assessment every year by the state. The state's required by rule to do an assessment to make sure you're functionally in a situation where you need help. The idea of somebody being on a waiver is to keep them out of an institution, out of a nursing home or skilled care, those sort of things. So that's why the state puts you on a waiver program so that you can have somebody come in and help you with activities of daily living, bathing, cleaning your house, whatever you need like that. And the cost for that for the state, the capitation payment is pretty high. It's over $5,000 per month for an individual that's on a waiver. If they're on regular Medicaid, the cost is only around $800 a month for somebody to be on standard Medicaid services. And because they haven't had those functional assessments, they shouldn't be on the waiver. They should have been removed from the waiver program. Some people have gone for literally years without having those functional assessments completed. And it's because of just failures on the part of KDADs to track those assessments correctly that allowed people to stay on the programs when they should have been removed. And some of them, and I have it in our interim report that we published, these are people that some have moved out of the state. Some have said, hey, I don't want the services anymore. Please take me off the waiver service. Or they're just non-reachable. Variety of reasons for them not having that functional assessment done. Sometimes they just simply won't answer the phone to schedule the assessment. So the state, instead of taking them off, they've just left them on the system. We've had reports from the managed care organizations where they've notified the state saying, hey, this patient no longer wants to receive waiver services. They want to be removed. They've submitted the appropriate form to the state, and the state still has not taken them off the system. And this has gone on for a long time. We identified in an audit report we did back in 2022 on the Home and Community-Based Service Program that the system that KDADS uses for tracking functional assessments, called the ks system, was defunct and needed to be updated and was flawed because it didn't track functional assessments correctly. That was in 2022. To date, that still has not been fixed. In fact, they were tracking that as an issue in the Bob Bethel Committee for years. There was $1 million that was given to them to get the ks system upgraded, and they never did do anything with it. So to that end, we're recommending again that the ks system be fixed, or they need to move it someplace else or do some other methodology for tracking assessments, but that has not been done yet. But we could save $36 million a year if we just simply take those people that have not had those functional assessments, drop them off of the waiver, and put them in standard Medicaid. They still have Medicaid benefits, but they wouldn't have those, they wouldn't be charging us that much. Hope that makes sense.
Yes, I'll have a follow-up in a second. Representative Brownlee Page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you feel that you have enough manpower to do what you need to do? Because these things are happening. I don't mean any disrespect on your watch and the previous individuals. So who's responsible to make sure everything is done? And do you have the manpower to adequately do it?
I don't have it's not my responsibility to remove them. It's KDAD's responsibility to be tracking that and removing them. They will tell you they don't lack the manpower. During our last audit, we had recommended they need to look at the staffing, because in some cases, like for an individual waiver, they have one person responsible for several thousand people. It's probably spread a little too thin.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming today. And my question, maybe I was lost here, and I could have you explain this a little better for me. You were talking about people that were on waivers and taking them off of the waiver, and you made mention of the fact that if someone was receiving in-home care, so if we took them off of the waiver that allowed them to be in-home care, are we then suggesting that we put them into an institution? Well, I was kind of lost because you kind of put the two in there together, so.
Now, let me clarify for you. No, I'm not suggesting that at all. The last thing we want to do is put somebody in an institution, into a nursing home or something. These are people that have demonstrated they actually don't really need the services, perhaps. They haven't been getting the services. We found that there were thousands of people, last time we looked at this, that simply weren't not using waiver services at all. And because of that, that demonstrates to me they probably didn't really need the service. But we're paying the MCO for the capitation for them to be receiving the services when in fact they weren't. And in this case, if they're not having the functional assessment, they're not reachable, they're not contactable, that's a responsibility on the patient's part to make themselves available for that functional assessment. And if they're not doing that, then it's kind of incumbent upon them to do that and should encourage them to get those assessments done.
Certainly. Thank you very much.
Steve, are there any requirements to review these on a set time frame? You know, on some of the other programs, there's like a mandatory review every 12 months. Is there any requirement for this particular thing?
They're supposed to have that functional assessment every 12 months. It's KMIS is supposed to be tracking that. One of the problems that exists in KMIS is it sends out a single reminder that the assessment needs to be completed. And if it doesn't get completed, there's no follow-up reminders to anybody about that. Bear in mind, we've only looked at 3 of the 7 waivers so far. There's more to be done. This is an interim report that we did. So we've got the other 4 waivers to be looked at. But yes, they're supposed to be looked at every year. That's a federal and state requirement that every year they're required to have that functional assessment completed by the state.
Representative Carr.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. So this is a function that the assessment is a function of KDADS, you said, correct?
Yes, sir. KDADS is required to track it, but they hire contractors to do the actual assessments.
So in your professional opinion, then would you say that KDADS would be the department that would be understaffed?
That is the indications that KDADS isn't managing it correctly. It could be too short staff. It could be they need better technology. They need to be maybe applying themselves a little differently. I don't know. I don't want to give an opinion on that because that's really not my place to give an opinion on that. But I will say that in the past we've looked at it and said that it appears that KDADS could use some additional staffing to help that because, like I said, on like the PD waiver, there's over 7,000 people on that waiver, and they've only got 1 or 2 people that are managing it, which is way too much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's it.
Representative Hellwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate you being here. I was going back to the first paragraph of your testimony here. You said the majority of the complaints involved eligibility fraud. You had over 1,400 complaints, but you said there's some other types of referrals that you have. What are those other things that you were looking at?
Sure. The other types we see involve providers that are, these are doctors or dentists that are overbilling. We also see fraud from a standpoint of identity theft, where we have people that are using other people's Medicaid cards to receive services. So we don't count that as an eligibility matter. The eligibility is simply somebody who's providing false information about household income or household composition or even residency. We see an awful lot of people that live in other states that are on Kansas Medicaid. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but the Kansas Medicaid's pretty good. And people who move from Kansas to Missouri and Oklahoma like to hang on to that Kansas Medicaid because it actually covers more things. So it's Kansas put together a good product. People want to keep it.
Appreciate it.
So, for an example, like somebody moved to Missouri, they're still on Kansas Medicaid, you get a call, complaint. What's the process that you go through from that point on?
Yeah, we would look at how long they've been on that. If it's just a short duration, we'll notify KDHE and it'll notify them and allow them to take administrative action. because it wouldn't be worth our resources to try to prosecute them. If it's somebody that's been over for a couple of years maybe, we would look at the amount of capitation that's been lost, and then we would actually put the case together. We would prove that they've been living in that other state. We've done that on a few cases. And we would do that by finding what their address is. We'd look at their driver's license to show that they had an address in another state. We'd look at even their telephone logs to show where they're using their phone at. And then we would put together a prosecution case. It would go either to attorneys within the AG's office that we use for prosecution, or we'd go to the county attorney and use them to potentially prosecute it. We've done it both ways.
Representative Carr.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Backing up just a little, because I don't understand what this means. Maybe you could give me some clarification. The waste associated with what's listed here is transmed. Maybe I'm, the dumb one in the room, but what exactly is that?
It's transitional medical. It has nothing to do with somebody who's transitioning for gender. It has to do with the transmed. That's somebody who's transitioning off of Medicaid into the workforce. It's a federally mandated program, and it is a program that if you are on Medicaid and you get a job and you want to transition over into the workforce, but a lot of places employers don't have a good medical for you, or it doesn't kick in until several months down the road. This is a program that will give you 12 months of benefits, will allow you to stay on Medicaid while you start that new job and get your benefits started with them and get on record. That's what transmed is in this case.
Thank you very much. I'm certain that all of my colleagues understood exactly what that was as well.
You want to continue? That'd be great.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
So I'm going to talk about ongoing audits that we currently have underway. The first one is we are doing a data share audit of the DCF and KDHE, and this refers to looking at Medicaid and SNAP eligibility data. We know from our prior work that the eligibility data for SNAP and Medicaid are slightly different, depending on how many people you see if you have in your household, whether or not a person in the household is related to the children or not, has a bearing on the eligibility criteria for both of those. And we're able to see both sets of data, and we oftentimes find discrepancies. And then I'll give you an example of one we just very recently had a person that with DCF was on child care assistance. She said she had a job, but she needed child care help to help pay child care for her child, which is perfectly understandable, right? That's a good program. It helps working mothers particularly get child care while they're working. The only problem is over on the Medicaid side, she was on caretaker medical because she had zero income, no job. Now, both things can't be true. Either you have a job or you don't have a job. And if she had reported her job, her income to Medicaid, she would have been removed from the Medicaid program because she would have been over income. But so to the Medicaid people, she said she had no income. But to the KDAD side of it, she said she had a job and needed child care assistance. That's just one example, but we see it the same way with whether the father's in the home or not in the home. Is the father related to the children or not related to the children? We see both of those. We see various huge differences in the amount of income, just problems like that. So we're looking at that data to see can that data be leveraged. We know with the SNAP error rate, one thing that would help them is I know there's some rules that kind of protect them from looking at both of them or being able to directly use, let's say, Medicaid, but it would at least give them a tip off that, hey, you said for your SNAP purposes, your income was this, but I looked over at the Medicaid side and you reported something completely different over there. Please clarify. So that information is available to them. It's readily seen. I know that there's rules and Dr. Hicks testified the other day about they can't directly use it, but they at least can reference it because it's readily available. It's easy to see in the system. So we're looking at that to see is there ways we can leverage that information? Can we use it to greater effect? And is there ways that we can work out systems where they will leverage each other's information and make better decisions and hopefully bring that error rate down, but also stop fraud in both systems? So that's what that audit's about. If you want me to stop for questions, sir?
Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so as I'm looking through this and as you're running through your testimony, I'm curious, who orders or authorizes these audits? Or do you just come to work and decide what fraud you're going to chase down today?
I appreciate the question, sir. We actually do a audit risk plan every year. My team gets together and we look at issues that we're aware of, and we look at risk. We see where there's issues, and then we decide what. But yes, I'm an independent office. Within the Attorney General's office, I can tell you the Attorney General has zero impact on what we do or don't do. It's 100% my decision with my team.
And thank you for that, because like, you know, we've got the LPA here, that they have regularly scheduled audits, if you will, as statutorily required. But then also legislators can recommend, you know, items that they would like for them to look into. And then that's a whole process. So I didn't know if you were similar in that you had statutory obligations for, but it sounds to me like you get together with your team once a year and make a plan, and then these audits are the fruit of those plans in that way.
Sure, and we take recommendations. We've conducted a few audits at the recommendation or the request where somebody in the legislature said, hey, I'm aware of a situation. Is this something that you could take a look at? In fact, in our appropriations, there's a request for us to look at specialty DME equipment in the upcoming years, to take a look at that, to see how that's flowing. So we do take, you know, recommendations or leads from other outside groups, but nobody tells us, you got to do this.
Well, and I ask this line of questions also in part because there's a House bill floating around out there to have legislative financial integrity auditors. And it'll be two positions. And as I'm looking at your audits here, knowing we have a division of post audit, and then we're going to have fiscal audits, I wonder where we get duplicative and you know, repeating the same work.
Sure. And just to be clear, our audits are strictly performance audits. We do not do financial audits. We've never been asked to. We haven't practiced that. We could, if for some reason those financial auditors were to be put in my office, we could certainly do it. But we are performance audits, and these audits, every audit you see on here is a performance audit. We don't do financials at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So then I guess that raises another question with me. Then we've got dollar signs all over this chart. And if these are performance audits, how do we verify the dollar signs if there's not a fiscal, you know, how
Well, let me explain a little bit. A financial audit's where you literally go in and look at the balance sheet for a business to see what their assets versus their liabilities are. That's more of a financial audit where you're actually tracing the money through. Our numbers come from looking at waste and savings that could be obtained by looking at the capitation payments or payments we've made out through the state is where we derive those monies from. We don't do a balance sheet review of an MCO to say, oh, well, they overbilled us for that.
and that makes sense. But then how are the savings verified? You know, because we can say that we changed course here, you know, we stopped a payment there, but how can you verify that that payment or that savings is actual?
Those are estimated savings. We could go back and do a audit of them a year or 2 years later and verify that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Representative Hellwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You were talking about the KEYS system and DCF and KDHE being able to see, maybe not being able to utilize it, being able to ask questions and things. Dr. Hicks was here the other day and talked about they have a fraud department that has roughly 14 investigators. I think they got a few other staff. There was a bill introduced to the committee the other day, I don't know whether we'll see it or not, saying moving those fraud investigators to your office. If that was the case, what kind of fraud would you be looking at? How would that process work of having their staff maybe work for you? I don't, can you work through that?
Sure. The idea, I suppose, is that right now they're looking at SNAP fraud. They look at the eligibility side of it. And I'll tie it back in with House Bill 2217 too, that would allow us to look at those programs. We would want to look at some of the EBT transactions, the SNAP benefit transactions at the grocery store level or at the end user level. for benefits that are being sold for 50 cents on the dollar. We would also want to look more deeply into the fraud. I was surprised a little bit when Dr. Hicks mentioned they don't see a lot of fraud. We see an awful lot of fraud in the Medicaid world, and since we've been getting referrals from involving cash food assistance programs, we're seeing a lot of fraud. Appears to be quite a bit of fraud in the child care side of it as well. So I would anticipate there would be more fraud that could be found. I do know that their practice has been with them is not to seek criminal prosecution on the part of the cases they do identify. They do administrative hearings with the person where they say, well, we've caught you, agree to the fact that you were misusing your SNAP benefits. We will put you on a year where you're not on benefits, and you'll pay that money back. And they pay it back by the following year. When they come back on SNAP benefits, they actually deduct a little bit out of the benefits they're receiving to pay back the debt they owe. But there's never any kind of a prosecution. They seldom refer any cases for prosecution. Part of it's because they don't have special agents. My office has special agents. We're able to move things forward. We've had a few cases where they're really, really significant cases with them. And again, they have to depend on a law enforcement body to move it forward because they can't do the affidavit to get somebody charged. So they lack that ability. If they were moved under my office, that ability would be there.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Representative Owsley.
Thank you. And I don't know if it was Dr. Whiteside Hicks or the LPA, Heidi Zimmerman, that was talking about the SNAP error rates, and they did not use the word fraud. They used the word error because a lot of that has to do with, a lack of information or misinformation, fast forward a week out of that snapshot in time. But I don't, so I wonder if that's not some of what you're seeing here also is an error, not necessarily fraud.
There's no question errors happen, but we also see an awful lot of fraud.
Excuse me. Representative Brownlee Page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You just said that, well, let me ask this question. Can you make a recommendation that your department would do the investigation? You're saying it would be better if it was under your department. Has there ever been a recommendation to do that, if that can save us money and make sure things aren't wasted?
Would you mind repeating it? I'm not sure I caught
Okay,
exactly what you were
said
saying.
If it was, and forgive me, I can't quote it verbatim.
Sure.
But you said if it was under your jurisdiction, you could investigate and do these things. I'm just saying, have there ever been a recommendation to do that? Because if they don't have the authority to do it, it would make sense that it would come under your jurisdiction.
As far as I know, there's never been a recommendation. This bill introduction that is the first time I've heard that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Representative Burkham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I might be skipping ahead a little bit, so I apologize, but under the pregnant women eligibility audit, just kind of what we're talking about here, it mentions talking about prosecuting people. How many people in your past audits, I guess, have been prosecuted for the findings that your group has come upon?
Well, just to be clear, audits typically do not lead to prosecution. Audits are separate. Criminal investigations are opened. And then toward the end of my testimony, if you want me to jump there, I will, we currently have 7 state-level criminal investigations and 2 federal-level criminal investigations that have been accepted for prosecution. Those are moving through the system. We also have numerous other investigations. We have over 100 open cases right now that involve various issues. Some of them involve not only eligibility, but also providers as well as state of Kansas employees. We also currently have 2 open investigations involving allegations of child care centers that are committing fraud. So that just puts it in that place. But yes, certainly under the Pregnant Woman Program, we identified in that that we were looking at the pregnant women program as a whole, and we found that when we started pulling data on that, that women who were 45 and older, there were 151 of them, and we found that 62 of them had absolutely no record of having any kind of check at all that would indicate that they'd seen a doctor. And we've talked about this in other committees. If you're 35 is considered a geriatric pregnancy. 35 and older is considered geriatric, and those are high risk. 45 and older is even much more serious. And some of these women are as old as 55, 60 years old that are claiming to be pregnant, and yet they've never seen a doctor. And so consequently, well, I got in trouble, one of the committee members for mentioning that the fact that my wife was old enough, that if she came out pregnant, that I would be getting her to the doctor, right? So, so it's the same sort of situation. So we found that 62 of them had absolutely no medical exams at all. Kansas has a infant mortality rate that we're not proud of, right? Well, one of the ways you help slow down that infant mortality rate is by getting wellness checks. And my daughter-in-law just had a baby a few months ago. She was a young woman, but she still saw a doctor every month. And for anybody that's, the situation, you go and see a doctor, but these people have had zero. So when we did some light investigative work, we found that, in fact, they hadn't been to the doctor. So we're going to be doing investigations of them, because not only do they get on Medicaid as a result of this, because we take self-attestation. In other words, if a person who calls up, they're 55 years old, and they say, I'm pregnant, the Medicaid eligibility worker says, okay, you're pregnant. And then they put them in the system. And then they're on there for 9 months for the pregnancy, and then for a year following postpartum. No questions asked. All right? So that's a problem, and it's costing us a lot of money. And I think the average capitation we're out is over $13,000. It's almost $800,000 we've paid out. That's just on the 45 and older. We know from some of the other ones we're looking at, we're going to see women in that group, the 18 to 44 group, that we're seeing this as well. And what that does is when you get on Medicaid because of a pregnancy, that also opens the door for additional SNAP benefits, for WIC, LEAP, TANF, you name it. It gives you those additional benefits.
Yeah, thank you for that. So just in general, if it's negligence, probably no prosecution, it's just human error. But if it's fraud, at that point, you'll look at prosecuting. So now that you're seeing maybe more fraud, we could probably expect to see more prosecution.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I will say this, we have found examples of mistakes, both on the part of the Medicaid beneficiary as well as on the part of the eligibility workers, where they just simply made mistakes. They checked the wrong box. We don't prosecute people for making a simple mistake.
Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a quick follow-up on that. So on page 5, you just went over it, 7 state level and 2 federal level cases. So you've got 9 investigations that have been accepted for prosecution. Out of how many cases and over what period of time?
Well, bear in mind, we did not get the ability to do criminal investigations till the start of fiscal year 2024. Up until then, we had no special agents or staff to do that. We got a supplemental or a enhancement to our budget that gave us the ability to hire 3 people. And we started doing investigations at that point. So prior to that, nothing. It takes a while to get cases through. We've already had a few cases go through the system. We had an individual who was lying about her husband. They were common law married. He was a police officer in a local community.
Just how many cases?
I think we've had 3. I'm just working off the top of my head, so don't hold me to this, but I think we've had 3 prosecuted. We've got some that are really close. This one federal case, she's already pled.
But out of how many cases?
Well, like I said, we've got over 100 cases open right now. And I wasn't prepared to talk about the numbers in this way today, but we've opened over 100 cases. We've closed several cases. I will tell you, we've also, and this is a good news thing, we've closed over 30 cases because the allegation was disproven. And if you've ever been accused of something and to have the allegation disproven, that's a successful investigation in my mind. So we've done that over 30 cases. If you're looking to do some numbers or ratios, again, the number of cases prosecuted, given the size of our staff, because I pointed this out the other day, DCF has 14 investigators. I've got 2 special agents, and up until just recently, only had 1 investigator. So it's not like I've had a robust staff to do things. We also have a lot of cases that are just sitting on attorney's desk waiting to be accepted for prosecution. So.
Representative Burkamp.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And apologize if you touched on this, but on your chart with the findings and recommendations, did we go over that at all?
We didn't talk about the findings and recommendations.
So when you provide these to the departments, do you circle back with them and ensure that they've taken it to heart, or is it you give it to them and then they kind of just do with it as they will?
No, I appreciate the question. That has been a topic in front of like the Senate Coach Committee, because in the past we would give recommendations and literally nothing would happen. And the Coach has said we need to be doing something different. So going forward on audit reports that we do in the future, we'll potentially have a corrective action plan associated with it. But that's also why this home and community-based service audit that we did in 2022, there were questions about it. That's why we circled back around and taking another look at it to see if they've taken any of our recommendations to heart, if they fixed anything. And unfortunately, some of it they haven't.
So would a corrective action be, and maybe somebody could lose their job, or there could be personnel changes, or what would be like some examples of?
That would be an example, is that there should be maybe disciplinary action if somebody is found to be negligent in their duty. If we would look for improvement. Certainly we see it even, the error rate for the SNAP program is kind of a situation. It's almost a corrective action plan is, hey, get that error rate or it's going to cost you money. I don't know that we would be served by taking funding away from KDADs because they didn't do what they were needing to do, but sometimes it's a matter of having the principals that are in charge, the senior managers, and asking them to come and explain what happened. That's usually productive.
Thank you for that.
Representative Brownlee Page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the pregnancy woman eligibility audit, you would think if, I don't mean any harm, is it a way you could ask for them to document that they're pregnant?
Is there a way to ask? Right now, the way the federal rule reads is they have to take self-attestation unless they have reason to believe otherwise or that there's information to the contrary. Unfortunately, KDHE's internal guidance to their staff is don't ask. Accept it as is and move on. So one of our recommendations is that they change that policy, that if you have somebody who should be suspicious about their pregnancy. Now, certainly there are women who are 47 that get pregnant, it happens. But there's nothing short of saying, hey, because of your age, we need some proof of pregnancy. And the interesting thing is DCF actually asked for proof of pregnancy, but Medicaid does not.
Okay, 'cause it just seems like that would be the thing to do.
Sure. I agree with you.
67, we're not running to have kids, but
Yeah.
you hate to ask that.
Yeah, now,
It needs to be asked to cut back on the misuse of funds. It would just make sense to.
I agree with you. I will share a case with you that we did involving a young woman who came in. She was 23, I believe, and said she had tried to get on Medicaid, couldn't. So finally she said, oh, hey, I'm pregnant. So they put her right on. She also went and applied for SNAP benefits, and they said, well, provide some proof, please, because we need some proof. So she provided a forged letter from a doctor saying that she was pregnant. And she was prosecuted for that. So she had both SNAP information. That was a case that we helped them get it prosecuted.
Thank you.
So fraud does happen. I mean, she forged a doctor's signature to get those benefits.
All right, appreciate it. And I guess you want to take it all the way to the end and we'll save questions.
Just tell me when you want me to stop, sir, and I'll stop.
Sounds good. Yep.
Okay. Let's see. I believe we were talking about that. We've already kind of covered the pregnant woman program. So I don't know that we need to go any further with that. The pharmacy dispensing fee is another review that we have undergoing, and that is situations where doctors write scripts for Medicaid beneficiaries to get over-the-counter drugs. The result of that is that they end up paying the state ends up paying a $10.50 dispensing fee to the pharmacy for that. So we're just looking to see is this being abused, or are we having doctors who are writing an awful lot of scripts for over-the-counters that a person could walk into the pharmacy or into Walmart or any other store and buy just over the counter without a script. And I think people don't realize that there's a $10.50 fee that goes along with it. So you're thinking, well, it's just a couple $1 drug, what's the big deal? But we end up paying a dispensing fee over and above the cost of the medication. So we're just looking to see what's going on with that. And then the HCBS 2 audit, and that is what we were talking about with people who are on waivers that perhaps shouldn't be. They haven't had their functional assessments and need to be removed, and I've talked about that quite a bit. And then the last thing is the issue brief on the voter registration that we put out. And that is an example of people that are on the program, is if you have a change of address, whether you're in Medicaid or in DCF eligibility areas. The way the Voter Registration Act works is the state has to send a packet to a person saying, hey, would you like to register to vote? And that's all well and good. That's a good program. Problem is that sometimes it gets out of hand. We've had people that have gotten numerous ones a year for that. And then if a person changes their address with DCF and with KDHE, then they get 2 voter registration packets. And that creates a big problem. We've also found that people that were not documented citizens have gotten them in a few instances. And it's just the cost involved, particularly if somebody ends up having an error with their address and they're back and forth, changing it back and forth. They get quite a bit of it. And it costs the state over $100,000 a year to send these out, when the problem being is KDHE, because of an agreement they entered into back in 2020, I believe it was, 2019, they ended up removing the federally mandated question or statement about if you do not check either box, you will be considered to have not registered to vote at this time. And if you leave it blank, KDHE's internal guidance says it's treated as a yes. Please send me a voter registration packet. But they should be checking, if they check no or leave it blank, it should be treated as no. And the problem with that is only 1.16% of the voter registration packets that KDHE sent out from January 2022 through June 2025 were the result of the person checking yes. So less than 2% people said, yes, send me that packet, please. Everybody else either left it blank or checked no, but yet we sent them out. So we sent out an awful lot of packets for people who really maybe didn't want them. And the MOU that KDHE and Governor Kelly had signed with the ACLU and different groups, that expired in June of this past year, so that's no longer in effect. And we're just merely asking for the state to correct their form, and in the report that we sent out to pretty much everybody, it shows a picture of the form that's on here, and it's missing that language. And we're asking just to correct that and put it on there so that people will know that, and to stop sending forms to people who left it blank. And that would save the state some money. It would also avoid people getting 17, 18 of these voter registration packets back and forth all the time. And it's just as one we looked at, we just looked at the cost for the mailings. We didn't look at the labor cost and all the other factors that go into it. So, and then if there's no questions on that, I'll just go ahead and jump to the investigations piece. And I think we've already kind of covered that though. So that's pretty much my presentation. More than happy to stand for any other questions that may come up.
Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. This is pretty interesting. I have a question on the National Voter Registration Act piece. My understanding is part of why it's done that way is because that is what the law requires. Not that it's necessarily a choice by the state to only mail it out to the people that vote yes. Do you have any insight on that? Because I suspect one of us is missing something here.
Sure. No, the federal guidance says that if a person checks yes, send it to them. If they leave it blank, that's treated as a no. It's in big bold letters in the statute. And if they say no, then don't send it either. It's pretty straightforward, but they do need to send it if the person asks for it. If they say yes, the states absolutely have to do that. It's my understanding in 2019, state of Kansas was out of compliance and they had to do kind of a correction, if you will. But then we entered into an agreement and we went over the top. We swung the other direction where we said, you know what, we're going to take that question off of our form and we're going to start treating blanks or, when they leave it blank as a yes. And then that's what started the tsunami of voter registration packets from being sent out.
Okay, I suspect that was the issue here. I literally I'm just glad you're talking about this. I just had a conversation with somebody about this and how it was to be in compliance with the federal government that choice had been made. Thank you very much. It's very helpful information.
Representative Brownlee Page and then Esau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about that too, because at that age group, you would assume that they're older, and if they're having problems with their vision, comprehension issues, they may not have really understood everything that's on the sheet. So it may be a problem with the wording and the way that it's set up, if they're comprehending what you're asking.
Well, they're,
A lot of volunteer work with seniors, and a lot of them don't understand. We actually have to walk them through the whole form. This is what they're asking here. This is what they're asking here. Do you understand? We don't fill it out for them. We're just saying, this is what you need to do. And they often say, well, I didn't know they were asking that. I wasn't sure. I didn't see it. So is there another way to get the information out that's cost effective? If cost is the issue, how can we do it?
well, this is part of the Medicaid application. It's a rather complex form, and a lot of people do have trouble with the form in its entirety. However, the state is required to provide assistance to people to fill it out. Whether it's language barriers or vision, the state is required to help people fill this form out. So that it's not from lack of having capacity, but I will say that the positioning of the questions is toward the very end of the form, after you've already spent probably an hour filling out some of this information, and people sometimes have fatigue when they get to it, but that's why. And if you look, it's relatively small too. It would be helpful, and the big bold letters that the federal regulation requires are pretty big. It would help people draw their attention to it, but that's absent from the KDHE version, but it's present on the DCF version.
Thank you.
Representative Esau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this information. Mine's about that as well. It's more, thank you for bringing that to our attention about what the federal requirement actually is, because I've had constituents frustrated because why am I getting all of these reminder to go register to vote? I'm a registered voter, which I agree, they're a registered voter. They don't need to get yet another reminder. They haven't moved. Nothing's changed. They didn't ask for it. And the agencies are spending money that they could be spending helping people that actually need the help. So I agree with your recommendation. We need to do something to dial it down and quit wasting money sending applications to people that don't need it.
Thank you.
On that point, so you've already made the recommendations to KDHE?
It's in the report that they,
Have they responded with any thoughts on your recommendation?
no, not yet.
Okay.
This was just published in beginning of January.
Representative Helwig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since we got a little bit of time, if you don't mind, I'd like to run back a little bit. This waste, overpayment, and savings, the chart that you gave there, are these federal funds? Some of these are state funds. Can you break down of how that was broken out?
Sure. The majority of them are going to be a combination of federal and state funds. Under KMAP, the federal government pays, I believe right now, around 61, 62%. The state picks up the balance. So if this was an audit that was done by HHSOIG, they would be telling the state you owe back 62% of this. And that's a bill we don't want to get.
Then just for fun, there was two things that you didn't touch on that had pretty good numbers on the waste side, and that was school reimbursements and CCRC. I'm not sure what that stands for. I know we heard the other day on the school lunch audit that there was maybe $48 to $53 million in overpayment due to the free and reduced lunch. Is that part of that, or can you explain where some of those numbers came?
You bet. Let me start with the school reimbursement. The $83 million there is amounts that we have paid in capitation for students who are receiving services while at school for Medicaid services that were paid to the MCOs, but then we end up paying fee for service for the same services out of our own pocket. So the MCOs are getting their capitation payments as if for the student, because they're on the Medicaid program with the student, but then we turn around any services they receive at the school, we then pay capitation, or we pay fee for service directly to the school for those services. And so that's the waste. The savings is if we would stop that from happening and have the MCOs paying the schools instead of us paying the schools, we would save 22.5 a year, and that's based upon looking at how much is being paid out. And there's a middle number there, $573,000 in overpayments. That was the result of us paying a school who had a medical necessity is one of the requirements for Medicaid services. It has to be medically necessary, and it has to be approved by a medical professional to do that. We had a school district that the school one of the school administrators that went and filed for an MPI number, which is a number that identifies a doctor. And to our surprise, CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Management Services, are the ones who issue an MPI numbers to medical professionals. They do nothing to verify who you are or that you have the credentials that you claim you have. So this administrator at this school got an MPI number, and then turned around and then was using that to approve the services that these students were receiving, and is resulting in that overpayment. This went on for years. He left the school and they continued to use that MPI number to verify the payment on it. It should have been caught by the state. It wasn't. So that's where that came from. So on the CCRC thing, that is the Continuing Care Retirement Center. Those are centers, it's not just a nursing home. You have to have like an assisted living, residential living, and then finally skilled care for people. And you fall into that, and for doing that, you get a big reduction on your bed tax. The bed tax for a standard nursing home is over $4,000 a year per bed. But if you qualify for the CCRC status, the bed tax is $818 per year per bed. As you might see, that's a pretty big savings. It's over $4,000 a year. So there's a group of facilities who are strictly just skilled care only. They do not qualify for CCRC status at all. They were providing false information to the state to get qualified for this so that they could get the lower bed tax amount. So because of that, and because we weren't doing a good job as a state of tracking that and making sure they were providing the correct information, we allowed them to get away with that, and we ended up out, and that was all state general funds, by the way. We resulted in overpayments, or money had to be put into a makeup account. It was $88 million. And because we suggested a legislative change, which happened, they moved that responsibility from Department of Insurance to KDADS and had their people start evaluating it. And then these facilities were being properly evaluated. We ended up saving $12 million a year doing that, and that's an ongoing savings. Because when we do claim savings, it's for 1 year. We don't claim savings for 20 years out or anything like it's 1 year only.
Thank you very much.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a curiosity question about the voter registration packets. So do you, I forgot what my question was. Okay, wait just a second. Oh, I know. Do you have any idea how many were actually, I understand how many were sent, but do you know how many were sent back? Do you have any idea how many people actually registered?
I don't know. I don't have that number. This issue brief was intended to be just an informative thing. It wasn't supposed to be a deep dive. But there's been a lot of interest in this, and I think we're going to do some of that work that you're describing
Okay.
to find that. But we're not sure how many actually came back or how many happened like that.
Yeah, it would be great to know, like, is this, I mean, I understand we have to do it if they request it, so we should.
Right.
But how many do we actually get back? So it's more of a curiosity question.
One of the other
Thank you.
questions too, I think that has come up is how many of these have gone out to people who are registered to vote?
Yes, exactly.
That's the other aspect of it is we don't do anything, as far as I can tell, to confirm that somebody said, hey, I'm a registered voter, please stop sending this to me.
Thank you for all your information. It was really helpful. Thanks a lot.
So, any further questions? So kind of looking at this, so you put a lot of time into the audits, try to figure out, you know, what can we do to make the system work better, make these programs actually adhere to the spirit of the law, letter of the law, and ultimately, I think we know that if there's a certain aspect of human behavior, human nature, if people can take advantage of the system, certain people will. But you also make some recommendations, and some of these recommendations may not be followed through with. Kind of at a little bit of a strange standstill almost, right? We know that there's potential for improvement. So if you were in our shoes and you could just say, what would you recommend? What would be a way that we can act on some of these potential opportunities for improvement?
I think one of the problems I ran into at one point was getting records from an agency, and there was a proviso that's put in their appropriations saying that you will provide those records to the IG's office. That was an example, and they started providing those records. So I think the legislative body's got some control of saying, you need to take these recommendations seriously or we will affect certain aspects. I think when we go in front of, particularly electromedicaid, in front of the Bethel Committee, there's an opportunity there. One of the things I'd recommended to the Coach Committee previously is within Bethel, they have a issues tracker, but I was never asked what issues should be tracked or what should be placed on that. And I said, that needs to be something that the Inspector General's office has a hand in, of what are issues we see that are important, what should be tracked. And that's one of the ways that can be done, is in front of committees, is have an issue tracker that that KDEDS, KDHE, DCF, whomever, would come up and talk about where they're at, what they're doing, what their corrective actions they're taking to fix the issue. I think it's one of the things that committees like this could do.
Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And your question about the time put in raised another question with me. So your team, for these audits, you guys keep track of your time and what report or what audit you're working on. So if I wanted to request from you, how many hours or what was the price tag of the CCRC audit 2403, that's information you could provide for me?
I probably couldn't give you as granular as you might like, but I could certainly give you a pretty good idea how many hours we spent on it. And bear in mind, it's a team. Like my time, I don't track it. I spent out 1 hour working on this audit. I worked 3 hours working on that audit. That's general time. I can tell you the amount of time my auditor spent on that exclusively. Because the way just so you understand, we assign an auditor to an audit, and that's their sole option to work on right then. They're not working on 3 audits. They're not bouncing around. They're solely working on that one audit from cradle to grave.
So that being said, then they clocked on Monday at, 8
Yeah, I'd say I can tease it out down to the last minute, but I could certainly give you a rough idea of how many hours were spent on a specific audit.
And team member A, clocked out at 3:30 on Wednesday from that audit, and team member B worked on it until 5:30 Friday afternoon. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was information I could receive. Thank you.
Steve, you mentioned that you had expanded capabilities to look into fraud in different areas, but your funding wasn't granted to fill those positions. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if those positions were filled, can you walk us through how you would use them, what results you would expect out of that your team, and kind of talk about, is there a return on investment to fill those positions?
I think one return on investment would be there. We would have a mix of auditors, analysts, and investigative staff, special agents across the board, because we were given 9 additional FTEs, and that was going to be a cross-section. Those FTEs were going to be focusing on the various cash and food assistance programs to do the high-level fraud, as well as do criminal investigations of those programs. They would also help supplement a little bit on the Medicaid side as well, because we just simply don't have enough resources in the Medicaid world for all the work that we have in front of us. I do want to point out, Medicaid's a $5.5 billion program, whereas SNAP and all that amounts to less than $1 billion. SNAP has 14 investigators looking at SNAP. I have 4 people right now looking at Medicaid. There's a huge disparity there. I think the amount of money that we've identified in waste and abuse or overpayments and savings is significant return on investments there. But those staff would be doing audits of programs like SNAP, TANF, child care. We'd also be looking more into the EBT side of things as far as the transactions. I will say this, the federal government, everybody thinks, well, the federal government's out there really hitting this stuff hard, right? I've talked to them. There's 2 special agents assigned to Kansas and Missouri. I asked the guy the other day, I said, how many cases do you have in Kansas? He said, 0. They spend all their time in the Kansas City metro area. They've never been to Wichita. So if you have EBT vendors out there, grocery stores, what have you, that accept EBT, there's nobody looking to see if there's fraud involving those systems. Okay? The SNAP investigators, they don't do that work. The federal government is not doing that work. We would try to take on some of that work. We would try to stop some of those transactions from occurring. I talked to investigators statewide who tell me about people walking into like Costco with a whole stack of EBT cards and using them to load up groceries because nobody cares. Those cards clearly do not belong to those people. They bought them. The going rate out there for EBT benefits is people will buy them for 50 cents on the dollar. So you come in and use your EBT card in my little grocery store, and I give you back 50 cents of every dollar that you basically redeem on there. And that's money in their pocket for running these small stores. And that's going on across the state. I mean, it goes across the nation. It's not just Kansas. But we know those problems exist, but we don't have anybody trying to stop it right now. The child care program, there's really no work being done in that area. We know that from conversations we've had. One of the things that surprised me the other day, I learned that child care benefits are actually paid to the beneficiary, who then in turn is supposed to pay the child care provider. There's no oversight. There's no checks on it. There's no confirming that the payments actually went to the child care vendor, if there's even a child care vendor that exists. So I think, yes, we would see some return on investment. These are all multi-million-dollar programs that have had very little oversight over the past several years. When we started doing Medicaid stuff, it was, and it continues to be, easy to find fraud, waste, and abuse because there was no oversight for the longest time. My office didn't really exist before 2021. And since then, we have really turned over an awful lot of information and a lot of big numbers because there was nobody paying attention prior to that.
Representative Wanda Lee Page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hear what you're saying, but the problem all along is manpower. You have to pay people. On the one hand, we hear people saying, cut, 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 waste too much money. And then you hear there's waste, but you got to pay somebody to do the work. So who's going to do the work and who's going to pay for it? Because you can't have your cake and your ice cream both.
Sure.
Be nice, but how's it going to get paid for?
Well, I agree with you. There's some things that they're working on to get better technology to identify through various electronic means some of the stuff to slow it down. I also think by correcting some of the oversights and procedures, some of it is just sloppy bookkeeping. I will give kudos out to some of the KDHE managers right now. They had a management change a few years ago. They've been far more receptive to our suggestions and have actually tried to turn the ship and do things to correct that. I will say that for sure. So it starts from the top down. Management has to make it a priority to stop wasteful spending rather than just saying, oh, well, it's water under the bridge, we can't do anything about it. So there are efforts being placed to do that. And our audit results are far more well accepted now by KDHE than they were in the past.
Well, I appreciate that, but I struggle because I don't understand how you do this without having the manpower to pay people to do it.
Well, I appreciate it, but if we're hemorrhaging $100 million a year, I think we can afford to hire a few people.
You have to have a little bit more than a few. All the stuff you listed, somebody has to be able to do that. And we got people who need jobs, who want to work, if it's at all possible. But thank you for your information.
Thank you.
So going back, on the appropriation side, do you have that ask in again this year? And do you have any updates on whether or not you expect to receive?
Don't know. I don't know. That's not really my area of focus. My budget stuff is separate from the Attorney General's budget, but that's being handled by fiscal operations. I'm being told that they're working on it. They're trying their best to get it, but I don't know what the status is right now on it.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Thanks for coming to committee today and presenting. Committee, that is all we have for today. I think one final announcement on Thursday. That is the last day for the committee to accept requests for bill introductions. So I think the official last day is Monday, next Monday. We're not meeting Friday or Monday. So if you have any bill introduction requests, please bring them on Thursday. And seeing no further comments, we are adjourned. Thanks.